Have you ever had a conversation with your spouse where you just couldn't get through to them? Like you're trying to explain something, but they're either not listening or completely misunderstanding you. Or maybe a small miscommunication turned into this bigger argument, leaving you wondering, like, what just happened?
Well, today we're breaking down the 5 key fundamentals that make marriage communication strong, clear, and full of love. And we'll talk about how to truly understand each other, to create a safe space for connection with one another and conversations, and how to build deeper trust in your relationship.
Yeah, and then to make this episode extra valuable, we're going to share real life stories and give you a few exercises that you can do today to strengthen your connection. So whether you're newly married or you've been together for years, these 5 fundamentals can transform the way you and your spouse communicate. So just as we start here, like think back to the last time you and your spouse had a misunderstanding. Like, was it over something big? Was it just a small miscommunication that turned into a big deal? And like hold on to that thought as we dive into today's conversation.
Yeah, so the first of our 5 things is empathy and understanding. And that's really like the foundation of communication. I do have a quote here, Verlinda, from a marriage researcher, a book talking about it. And it just I really love how he states the obvious. And like sometimes I feel like you need to do that. And it's a little bit technical, but he says the goal of quality communication is the achievement and maintenance of interpersonal understanding. Right? In other words, like we're just doing this so we can understand each other, so we can get to a place of understanding and stay in a place of understanding. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. So I want to unpack empathy in a moment here, but just kind of talking about like how this works. One of the things about this is also like belief they found. So if you believe that your spouse is likely to show empathy or understanding, then you'll communicate more effectively. So there's like something in here where it's like if I sort of carry a default belief about you, and this is apparently is especially for women, like one study looked at the relationship between expectations and communication behavior. And when the expectations were positive, like wives expected something good from their husband, they were less likely to show criticism and contempt. And they responded to their husbands with less defensiveness when things came up. And they showed more positive emotion kind of through the whole thing. Right? Now, I don't know about you, but to me, it almost sounds like that's putting some pressure on women to believe great things about their husbands.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are you saying then?
Well, I think the flip side here is that I want to call husbands to like demonstrate good behavior over time here, like just to be what we call reliable, about making it a discipline in your marriage to be empathic and to strive for understanding with your spouse, to really try to get into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'm glad you emphasized that because as you were saying that, I was thinking like, but then the husband's just going to turn to the wife and be like, oh, well, you're not believing properly, just like you're overreacting or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy to kind of blame that belief thing on the other person. But
yes.
I do think both people could have a role in this in the sense that like, am I going to own as a husband that I'm going to work hard on having understanding or making understanding happen? Like a lot of us dudes, we just kind of have this stereotypical belief that like women's emotions are inexplicable, they're not understandable, they're not rational, and it's just kind of like, it's like Pandora's box. Like you just don't want to go near that thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's embedded in our culture. And we imply that when we say things like, well, I need you to just be rational with me, or I need you to think clearly for me for a moment here. The truth is, like, if I want to understand you, I need to make room to get a handle on what you're feeling, because your feelings have a reason for being, and what you're thinking. Like both of those things are important to get understanding.
And I wonder if this like positive belief is more of an earned belief. Like part of it is giving my spouse the benefit of the doubt, and part of it is having experienced them before, I have confidence in how they're going to respond. And so I feel safe to do that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Although sometimes like we can get a negativity bias and just notice the miss moments, and it can
Yes.
be like a healthy discipline to say, hey, I want to catch and affirm the positive moments that my husband is doing here
Yes,
to
absolutely. Yeah.
build that belief. So it's not, I don't want to take all the power away from women here to own something, for wives to say, hey, I need to notice when my spouse is stopping and listening to me and thank him for that, or affirm that, or just appreciate it, right? That if that brings that belief up in me, which will predispose me to be more positive
Predispose the husband. Yeah. Yeah.
towards him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, predispose the wife to be more positive in receiving what he's doing is what I meant. It's not her job to predispose her husband, I don't think.
Yeah. Okay. But we say what we want more of. So if I'm
Yes.
commenting on that he's going to understand well and thanking him for his empathy, that's going to draw more of that from him as well.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about empathy, Caleb, you
Yeah.
said you were going to talk more about it. What is empathy?
The easy definition that I like for empathy is like when I stand in your shoes and look at the world through your lens, like through whatever you're experiencing. Like when I really put myself in that place, it makes sense that you feel what you do, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It makes sense that you feel
That's
what you
good.
do. Like, how do you do empathy or teach empathy to when you're working with couples?
Yeah. It makes sense is a term we use a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that basic affirmation of reality.
Yeah.
That's a way of stating empathy. Yeah.
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 And like, it doesn't mean that you agree with everything that they're stating,
Right.
but it means you understand that if I was in your shoes, having walked to this point,
Yeah.
I would be reacting the same way.
Yep. From your
And your
perspective.
reaction makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Now, we need to move on to other points, but in some ways, this is kind of like this is key to everything else, I think. I
Okay.
mean, a lot of these are key to each other, but we'll elaborate on this one a little more. So I just have one more thing here, okay? There is, and if you ever want any of these references, you can find them in our show notes, and we'll give you information about how to get those at the end of the episode. But there's a widely accepted conceptualization of empathy that says it has three main components. Okay, the first is called cognitive empathy, which is the recognition and understanding of the emotional states of others. So I'm just like with my brain aware that you are having sadness right now because there are tears coming down,
Okay.
right?
So awareness,
So
like
that's
the cognitive.
recognizing, yeah, that's
Mhm.
paying attention, which is a good thing to do. We call that attunement in other kinds of therapy. The second thing is emotional empathy, which is experience sharing. So that means I share the emotion of others while I maintain a distinction between myself and you. So again, if you're upset with something that happened at work, I can get upset alongside you. Like it makes sense. I can feel the upset. Yeah, I know why
Mhm.
you're upset. It's because whatever, and maybe I'm just repeating something there or helping you make sense of it. That's emotional empathy, but at the same time, there's kind of a trick to doing that. Maybe this is a little hint for our empaths. They've probably started to face some of these things. Like your upset doesn't have to become my upset. I don't have to go storming into your office to solve the problem when you're upset at
Mm.
work, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's
I
the
mean,
part about maintaining a distinction between self and other.
yeah, closer to home might be something to do with kids versus work even,
Yeah,
because then we like with work, we don't have the opportunity to kind of take it on and
right,
storm in, but if it's something in the home, I do,
right.
but I shouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the third kind of empathy that's part of is another component of empathy, not a kind of empathy, but a component is motivational empathy, which is also known as empathic care, which is feelings of concern for the other and a willingness to put effort into improving their well-being.
Okay. So it's motivating me. If I have empathy for you, it's motivating me to do something to care for you.
Yeah. 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 And good for, like, again, we do harp on men a little bit here on this topic when we do some of our seminars and stuff, but men kind of rush to solutions. But
Mm.
this is at the back of the list, okay? So I'm concerned about you and I want to help you solve this after I've entered into the emotional experience, after I've noticed and validated.
Yes.
That's the right
Yes.
timing. Yeah.
If you haven't done the first two, the third one's not empathy. It's just solution finding,
Yeah.
fixing the
Precisely.
problem. Yeah. So, like, as we're thinking about this empathy piece, one takeaway for ourselves is like, think about the last time you and your spouse had a disagreement. Like, did you truly try to understand their point of view, or were you just waiting for your turn to talk? So try this. The next time you're having a conversation, just pause and ask yourself, like, do I really understand what they're saying? And ask yourself that before responding to your spouse.
Yeah.
Like, do I get it? Or
Yeah.
am I just talking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really going for that understanding. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to take us to the second point?
Yeah, for sure. So another thing that's like a key proponent in communication connection is safety, like creating a judgment-free space in your marriage. So a person, a spouse, they must feel really safe in order to indicate how we really feel. So he or she must be convinced that no harm will come from an expression of their feelings in order to be fully comfortable expressing themselves emotionally. And this is from the research from Harper. So with safety, like, you can send the signal to your spouse that they are safe with their emotions when you don't try to talk them out of them. Like, you don't dismiss them. You don't turn or hide away from them. You don't tell them, oh, it's not a big deal, it'll be okay. Because that's telling them that their feelings aren't valid. Like, I'm just dismissing them. So, like, when we hear stuff, we might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But being with them and letting them feel what they're feeling and then validating those feelings, that creates safety.
Yeah. What are some common things that you think you hear people say when they don't know they're dismissing, but they're just trying to be good humans even, but they're actually dismissing their, like, what are those little phrases that come up so often?
I think a key word that just came to mind is just.
Just?
Oh,
Okay.
you just need to pray about it. Praying's
Mm.
good, right?
You just need to take a step back.
You just need to relax. So anytime you insult the just in there, not gonna help.
Probably not gonna work. Yeah. Yeah. Or it's gonna be fine. It'll all work out.
Yes,
Don't worry about it. I don't think you need to be this worked up about it.
right.
It's
And
like that's zero understanding right there. Never
yes,
mind safety. Yeah.
yes. And I have empathy for the motivation in those because
Yeah.
they're trying to create safety
Yes.
by saying, like, no, it's going to be okay. Like, just do
Yeah.
this and we'll be safe. And in
Yeah.
so doing, they're shutting down their spouse,
Yep.
and their spouse is learning, okay, I can't actually bring this to
Yeah.
my spouse anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm glad you brought that empathic perspective in, or even like for Linda, like a lot of times too, like if you're upset, I want you to not feel upset.
Yes.
So I'm going to help you unupset by sending it away. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, the way to unupset your spouse is to meet them in
Mm-hmm.
their upset. And if you feel like super seen and also like companioned, like there's somebody with you, then all of a sudden, like that big thing now is like manageable.
Yeah.
Manageable. Yes.
Yeah.
Co-regulation with your spouse. So I'm here with you. I'm feeling this with you. And I'm not trying to send this away, but I want you to know right beside you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another practical tip, like next time your spouse shares something personal with you, resist that urge to kind of react and fix immediately and instead just listen and say, like, I hear you. I appreciate you telling me this. Or like, I hear you. Thanks for sharing it. Like,
Yeah.
it's a small change, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, Verlinda, back to a time a few years back when we made a major change in like which church we were going to. It was like from one kind of a church to another one. So it wasn't just changing the church, but the whole sort of denomination, if I can use that word. And I remember like having all these thoughts in my head. And for me, sharing those thoughts is scary because when you get married, you think you're kind of doing this one thing your whole life. And this is the kind of thing that's a major change. And for others, this might be like career change, or I need to move back closer to my parents, or like other things like that. And there's a risk of that self-disclosure. Like, what if we're not on the same page? And I'm saying, hey, this big thing is moving for me. It's shifting this value that we kind of assumed was an implicit and constant, unchanging part of our marriage. Well, I knew potentially that could raise a ton of insecurity for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in that process, I don't remember the conversation explicitly, but we agreed to like start just talking, even if it was scary,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just sharing. And as we did that, it got less scary. And eventually we realized we both wanted the same thing, but we actually wanted it for slightly or fairly different reasons. And just making that safe space to put this thing out there. And neither of us, I was like, I'm not doing anything rash. I'm not doing anything radical or fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fairly
Yeah.
radical, but it's not fast. It's not forced.
Yeah.
Like, I want you with me.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
just like going off in a direction here.
Yeah. We had to let each other like have our own motivations and convictions, but make it safe to share that by not
Yeah.
freaking out when the other person shares
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna manage my fear while I'm listening to you and not like back you down or back you off because I'm feared. That's giving you safe space.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Does to me.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. What's the next one?
Number 3, fundamental for good marriage communication: acceptance.
Yes.
Acceptance. And this is showing love without putting extra conditions on it. And it can be simple phrases that we can communicate just by saying, I care about what happens to you. I'm concerned about you as a person, not like in a scolding, scorning sort of way, but it's just a genuine, hey, I'm worried about you and I want the best for you. You and your problems are important to me. And also like acceptance around misbehavior, like not like abusive misbehavior, but just like, you're struggling. It's not the shiny side of you. And you can say things like, I'm not fond of what you're doing right now, but I love you. And I want like um, I know there's a Everlyn in there who wants to do better or who can do better. Like just kind of saying like, it's that belief of like, hey, there's something precious in here and whatever's happened for you right now, like it's not coming out. But I want you to know I'm here. The love is here. You're safe with me. You're accepted. Yeah.
That even goes back to the first part about like believing, like giving your spouse the benefit of the doubt, right? Like I believe that
Yeah.
there's good in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of a funny one that happens in our family. And I've had this pattern, let's just call it that, over the last few years where I overheat at breakfast, like every single breakfast, overheat. And I'm sure sometimes it's embarrassing for my family, but you know what? They just love me anyways. And for my last birthday, they all gave me fans for different reasons. Ha ha ha. But I use them at the breakfast table now. And even Caleb has researched, what did you research? Like sheets with bed sheets that have a fan in them or something to keep me cool at night. And it's like, I know in that moment, like I am fully accepted and you love me enough to, I don't know, try and help.
Yes.
But I feel loved already. If
Yes.
you were just trying to give me solutions because you were embarrassed or frustrated, like that would not go. But because, I don't know, it's like a lighthearted thing.
It is. It has become that. And yeah, I think it's a good example. We don't need to
Just leave it there.
unpack it more, but that's been
Yeah.
a fun one. So yeah, and acceptance can be, but I think that Verlina, we will just say this, that it does happen everywhere from like the little details, like the stuff that's easier and funnier, rather than just sort of getting annoyed or like eye rolling or contempt. It's like, cool,
Yes.
right? And then on other topics, like we get pushed a little harder to show this acceptance thing, right? Like if somebody's really struggling with, yeah, I don't want to start unpacking a whole other thing there, but it does get harder in some cases. We understand that.
Because sometimes we're embarrassed with our spouse's behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Those are tougher ones.
Those are tougher ones. But how can we send the message of like, I love you anyways?
Yes. That's good. And the practical tip here, like one way to do that is to express appreciation and gratitude for your spouse, right? Whatever that topic might be. And maybe even like if, there's some things that you're struggling to appreciate or accept, like are there other things you can send the signal on so they still know that you see the whole person and not just this part that they're struggling
Mm.
with right now? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Or even like character. Like I love how thoughtful you
Yeah.
are. Like those things can make a huge
Especially,
difference.
yeah, the who. Yeah. Take us to the
Who?
next one, Verlinda. The who they are instead of the what they're doing.
Oh, I see.
Appreciating that.
The who.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, fourth thing is respect. So this is like speaking kindly even when I'm upset. And this is easy when we're getting along. But some back to the research, each spouse must learn to proceed on the fundamental conviction that nothing is so important as to warrant the violation of integrity in marriage. So nothing bad enough happens in marriage for me to violate my own integrity and speak in a way that I'm not proud of, or to violate my spouse's integrity and like attack or cut them down.
Mhm. Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It does. Yeah. I think another way that we've put this is it's like holding sacred the bond between us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Even while we're disagreeing.
Yes. Yeah.
Even while we're disagreeing.
Okay. So, like, this happens between us, obviously, like, we need to show respect. But this can also happen when our spouse is not around. It's like me having your back when you're not around. You're
Yeah.
important to me, whether you're in the room or not.
Yeah.
So, like, we've used the example before of like a bunch of ladies sitting around eating salads, complaining about their husbands.
Yeah.
Well, is that
Yeah.
respectful for me to sit
Yeah.
here complaining about my spouse when he's not in the room?
Yeah. Or guys talking to each other about the old lady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
holding that respect up together and not together.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that just makes marriage more enjoyable, like having that security. Like it's nice to be able to assume that.
Yes.
Um, and it also like the safety and the respect during the arguments kind of sends that message that, hey, like we'll solve problems somehow. We're going to get through this
Mm-hmm.
without harming each other.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it doesn't mean we can't disagree. It doesn't mean it doesn't even mean that we're not allowed to be mad at each other. Like that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
But we're going to do this in a way that's respectful and just like a real deep commitment to that, especially
Yeah.
without name calling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, practical tip there. Next time you're in an argument with your spouse, before you respond, just pause, ask yourself, is what I'm about to say building our relationship up? Is it maintaining that respect, or is it actually tearing down? Is it corrosive to the bond that exists between us? These words that I'm about to
Mm-hmm.
use.
Can I ask a really practical question?
Yeah.
So, if I am super mad at you and you just told me something, if I pause and went through that whole question in my head,
Yeah.
that's a long time for my spouse to be looking at me and I'm not saying anything. Like,
Yes.
is that a good thing?
Well, if you guys argue occasionally, as all of us do, or more, you might know that your spouse is doing that. But if you think your spouse doesn't know that that's what you're doing, then tell them that's what you're doing, and just be like, "Hang on a sec, I'm really ticked off, but I wanna hold like you in high regard during my response, and I just need to kind of cuss inside my
Mm.
head for a minute here."
No, don't say that. No, 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 no. But I need to make sure
No.
it's respectful.
Yeah, not gonna let me have that. All right.
Well, if you told me that you were so mad at me that you were cussing inside your head,
Yes.
that would not go over. Like, well, let me hear it then. Like that would just escalate it,
Okay.
in my opinion,
Yes.
for me. But if you told me like I'm really mad, but I want to make sure what I say is respectful. So give me a minute to
Okay.
rephrase it or something just
Yes.
slightly different.
Audience, go with Verlinda's suggestion. Okay, fifth fundamental, openness. You could call that the power of honest conversation, but I actually think it's the effort of like making yourself talk about stuff that you need to talk about. Self-disclosure.
Mhm.
All right. So I'm an introvert. If for those of you who are familiar with attachment styles, I grew up avoidant, right? So for me, self-disclosure is just like unnatural and terrifying and all sorts of stuff, right? And so it's a little harder to kind of push through that, but openness is so important of just like sharing the stuff. And like we've said, finding ways to do it that's safe, that are respectful, but being genuine, being transparent
Mhm.
about what's going on, awareness of what is actually going on for me, and then disclosing that in a way that you can receive it. That's easy. That like it's not attacking or blaming, but where I'm owning as
Mhm.
much of this as I can. And that's how like it's just revealing yourself to others. Like
Mhm.
I can guarantee you for non-abusive marriages that your spouse wants to know more of you, wants to know more about
Mhm.
what's going on in you, and you are more complex and more fascinating to them than you realize.
Mhm.
And so openness, like just get into the habit of sharing that, like especially again for folks like me where it's hard, where it's not natural. It's being like, no, this is the space where I need to push myself on that and begin to develop that skill. And then obviously if that, whenever that gets met with like acceptance and love, I mean, that's where the good stuff for intimacy really
Mhm.
starts to happen. Hey?
Yeah. Yeah. And then even receiving it too, like it needs to be reciprocal. If you open up and share something vulnerable or personal with me,
Yes.
I need to receive that and not brush it
Yeah.
off. Because if I brush
Yeah.
it off, like never gonna happen again.
Yes.
Door slams shut. Yeah.
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 Really good to catch those moments and thank you for sharing or something, at least, or
Mhm.
I hear you, or yeah, like that makes sense, like we said earlier. See how all those
Yeah.
things kind of tie together, right? It's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, practical tip for listeners as you're working on this and as you're working on receiving this, that you can do to just kind of check in on these things is just have this 10-minute conversation with each other. Ask your spouse, hey, what's something I did this week that made you feel loved? And it might surprise you. Um, and
Mhm.
and validate, accept what they say, and then ask a tougher question, which is, what's something I did that hurt you, even just a little bit? And then again, whatever they say, it's super important here that you don't get defensive, that you don't try to explain it away or justify it. Do not use the word just. Just listen. Oh, sorry. I used the word just. Instead of using the
Mhm.
word just, whoa, it's hard not to use it. Instead of using the word just, lean into the discomfort of hearing something about yourself that they experienced that you're not proud of and say, I can see why that hurt you. Thanks for being brave enough to
Mhm.
tell me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to
Like we're
work on that.
going yeah, we're going for understanding here.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
not to defend yourself, but to listen and
100%.
understand.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening. You can get the full show notes at therapevo.com/281.